Okay, welcome everyone, and I'm very glad that you could join us today. My name is Paula Newcomb, and I'm the Northeast Regional Coordinator of the Indiana State Library's Professional Development Office. I will be the host and the question moderator for today's webinar, Make a Mini Makerspace, presented by Lizzy, Boden, and Britney Musial. Britney is the Teen Tween Librarian, and Lizzy is the Adult Services Librarian. They are both at the North Riverside Public Library in North Riverside, Illinois. So just a few housekeeping items before we start. If you are having sound issues during the webinar, please see the sound issues box just below the chat box. If there is a global sound issue, we will announce it in the chat box. If you are unable to resolve the sound issue you are experiencing, we are recording the webinar and you can watch it offline after it has ended. If you have a question, just type it in the chat box on the upper left side of the screen. I'll be watching and will get your question to Lizzy and Britney as soon as there's a good opportunity. There should also be time near the end for questions. The session today is worth 1 LEU and your certificate will be available for download at the end of the webinar. If you are watching an archive recording of this presentation, information on how to obtain your LEU is in the video's description in YouTube. After the webinar has been transcribed, it will be available on the Indiana State Library's Archive Webinars page. For weekly updates on upcoming trainings and to learn more about what's happening in libraries across the state, please subscribe to the Indiana State Library's e-newsletter, The Wednesday Word, and check out our continuing education website for other professional development opportunities. Okay, let's get started. I am now happy to turn the presentation over to Lizzy and Britney.
Well, hello everybody, and thank you so much. We've really been enjoying watching all the places that all the webinar attendees are from, so thank you all for attending. My name is Lizzy Boden, and I am the Adult Services Librarian at the North Riverside Public Library.
And I am Britney Musial. I'm the Teen Tween Librarian, and because nature hates me, my allergies are acting up, so sorry if it's hard to understand me because my throat's all raspy and I sound like a frog.
So if anybody needs us to repeat anything while we go, please, Paula, don't hesitate just to let us know.
I might say Britney. Britney might need to be a little bit closer to the microphone when she speaks, okay. Just adjust it as you can.
Let's try this.
Thanks.
Hello, I'm Britney. How's this work?
Is that all right?
It's not too clear. Are you guys sharing a mic, or is it between you?
No, it's between us. Give us 1 second. Sorry, everybody, for that, because we did do a sound check, but let's make sure that this is going okay before we really get into it. Is this any better now?
That's great.
Britney, maybe better.
How does it sound? It sounds good.
Better, but when you start speaking, maybe get closer to the mic. But we'll go ahead and get started. Thanks about checking all that.
Okay. Sorry about that, guys. Okay, well, thank you for your patience. Okay, well, with that, we will get right on into it with the plan of what we're going to discuss today. So our first topic, or first part of the presentation will be about why makerspaces, sort of why should libraries get involved with this. And then because we'll be telling you about our own experience, we're going to tell you first a little bit about our community so you can understand where we're coming from. We're going to talk about patron surveys and feedback, and then our response to that feedback, which was the process of actually making these mini makerspaces, how we make it work, and then some tips and tricks that anybody can follow as we go.
All right, so why makerspaces? We realized that when we were going into this, we didn't really know what a makerspace technically meant. Like for us, we always assumed it was like a 3D printer or just like a lot of like fun sewing machines or like just any kind of technology. So what we ended up doing was we actually kind of found a creative way to figure out what our patrons would more so need rather than what we thought that they would need. So this involved like anything actually involving coding or crafting and access to the technology that maybe they just didn't have at home. So we were kind of like looking at this as a way to engage patrons more fully, that we realized that libraries in the 21st century could probably actually give patrons more. And what we wanted to do was just basically provide that education, the entertainment with that whole, they're not really realizing they're learning something, and we're kind of being sneaky about that, but it's just a way to get more information out into the public and for them to learn more about what the world has to offer for them.
Yes. So, okay, a little bit about North Riverside and our community. Our community, North Riverside, is located just outside the city of Chicago. So though we are a fairly small community of just under 7,000 people, we are nevertheless surrounded by really big communities and millions of people. Our library is about 22,000 square feet, so it's actually a fairly large size for the population that we have. About 4,500 of our residents hold library cards, which is close to 70% of the total population, which is a number we're really happy with. And then we have 25 staff members here at the library. However, the vast majority are part-timers. Only 5 of us are full-time, Brittany and I being 2 of those 5. And then the library is laid out in such a way that we have a main floor and a lower level. So on the main floor, we have our circulation desk and our young adult and adult sections, 1 meeting room. And then kind of what we'll be talking about today is a computer room with 6 public computers and 1 very small private study room. And then in our lower level, we have our children's departments and a story time room for programming, 2 public computers, 2 study rooms, and this sort of Harry Potter-esque under the stairs space that was always kind of dead space, but an interesting place nonetheless. So we will go into that as well. And then a bit about our community, our local community. It consists of a lot of different organizations that are available for partnerships for Makerspaces. So we have our grade school, kindergarten through 8th grade, Kamaric. And Kamaric is kind of an interesting situation because the school is a little bit too small for the community now. And they actually just recently underwent a referendum because it's also kind of outdated physically, and they wanted money to redo it and create spaces for that kind of 21st century learning. And unfortunately, the referendum did fail. But we did see this as a place where we could step in and partner with them to offer that type of experiential learning that they might not have the space for. We also have a Montessori school right nearby. And across the street from us is a preschool and also our Parks and Recreation department, which offers programs for all ages, and they're a great organization to partner with too. So we highly recommend sort of doing the work. Most people have already done it, but like within your local community, figuring out who to partner with sort of as you go through this process.
So we realized putting suggestion boxes around the library was the best way to figure out what did the community need from us. The main floor circulation had like the greatest positive way to talk to the patrons about what they needed because they were the ones that were like interacting the most with these patrons, talking about like the books they were checking out and talking about how like, oh, I have these gardening books. It'd be great if you guys had gardening tools to check out. So they were taking notes, and this also helped the lower level to take notes from the parents, saying that they really wish that their kids had access to laptops or computers to help with their schooling. We also have a teen advisory board. It is involving 6th to 12th graders. They meet once a month, so this is the greatest way to get the teenagers involved to hear what they would like to see at the library, what will help them. We have an adult town hall forum. That's the ages 20 to 50 range. And then we have technology help that we just happen to realize that anyone that was 50 and older, they really came in asking for help with their phones or laptops or even the computers that we had, or just anything that they were just coming across into this world saying, what can I do with this machine? Can you guys help me with this? So because of our smaller library and the budgets that we have, we realized that to get to the community, we made these surveys with a website called canva.com. It's completely free. We print out all of our own things. So we kind of looked around at what other libraries were doing in their makerspaces. We were taking the notes that the patrons were giving us that they wished that we had, and we kind of made it a consolidated survey that everyone can look out. We didn't give them like a ton of options. We kept it smaller. We gave them the ability to ask for something else, but we wanted to make sure that people knew we could check out these kits for them, but they could also use things at the library, and that's where we're going to actually make that maker space. But because we are smaller, we don't have a lot of that room, we were realizing that we could have them check out these kits to take home with them.
Yes, and one thing I'd like to notice about the, to bring up about these surveys is that we offer that little box that says other, but other than that, we are actually sort of trying to offer a lot of options and not make it fully open-ended for the patrons. What we sort of discovered is that when it's very open-ended, people got like a little intimidated and they couldn't come up with ideas, or they came up with ideas that weren't quite relevant to what we were asking. So we did discover that it was better to offer, to, you know, kind of do our own surveys and our own research and offer specific things. And then within that context, let people think of other things that they might want as well. So that turned out to be important. And of course, these surveys are good to give to the any partnering organizations as well, for them to either think of or take to their patrons. Okay, so what we heard. So in our particular community, we discovered there was less of a desire for more flashy makerspace materials like 3D printers, but a lot of interest in things that you could use to make something for a local organization or for a party or something like that. For t-shirt presses and button makers and laminators have been by far, that was the biggest request. And Cricut machines, like vinyl cutters that you could use and then iron on to like a tote bag or a t-shirt. And then, of course, there was a request for programs centered around these new technologies. But we also even just heard from seniors that they would like things like more basic technology help classes kind of as part of this, more resources for parents and students. And we did discover that adults got really excited because they thought, okay, you know, the library is somewhere I can come for a book club, but like never somewhere I would think of where I could come to use technology or to try new technology, something that I wouldn't ever buy myself. And, you know, Britney can tell you a little more, but the teens, they didn't realize, you know, they've always done crafts at the library, but they didn't really realize that technology was a possibility. And so, basically what we noticed was extreme excitement. People were on board from the very beginning, right from when we started talking about it.
So again, what did we do with the feedback? With that idea that we really needed a lot of technology help, we realized that the circulation manager had a ton of knowledge about this technology, and we realized that we needed to pull him away from it, more so make him the technology manager. Other than that, all the managers, the 5 of us, we meet to reconstruct the budget to make sure, do we have the ability to make these maker spaces work? This involves like the materials, the upkeep of everything. So what we did instead, when we were kind of waiting to reconstruct the budget and get that approved, we applied for a ton of grants. We had like maybe 5 or 6 people at one time just looking for everything that involved like helping make these spaces work. But the biggest thing was that we talked to our friends in Foundation because they're recently merging together to help support our library. We realized that they were the greatest people to make sure that we were getting those like extra little things now. Like we got a sewing machine from them basically right now because of our last book sale.
Yes, and then, you know, we also began to notice that while many staff members were applying for these grants and starting to think about this space from that perspective, there were a lot of staff members who were really interested and felt really strongly but didn't feel necessarily comfortable applying for grants from outside organizations, or maybe weren't having their ideas heard. So our library actually created something called Strategic Plan Mini Grants. We took a budget line for it, so we actually set aside money, and that allows staff to suggest ideas to meet patron needs that support our strategic plan, which in this case applies to the Makerspace. And this was a really great way to allow staff to sort of take ownership of this space and to really uplift their ideas as we went along. And so now, before we kind of get into the rest of the talk, one of the things I'd really like to bring up here is that this process for us is very much ongoing. It really is a work in progress. And I think that we're coming at it very differently than a bigger library with a more robust budget might do. And that's, you know, sort of by necessity. So we've been applying for grants, and we've been really creative about thinking about how we can use those grants now and in the future. So some of the ones we've received have been restricted to age levels. So we received one grant aimed specifically for teenagers and another grant aimed specifically for seniors. And that actually allowed us to begin to sort of rethink the library spaces, to begin to create these maker spaces. And right now, the spaces are reserved for those age groups due to the terms of the grants. But in the future, now that we're creating it and that we have this technology, and when the grant terms end now, I think about 6 months from now, then those spaces will become available to the full public, and we'll still have been able to buy that materials, and the staff will have learned the expertise to run the machines and so on. So I think whereas a bigger library than we are might come at it from the point of view of deciding to create a makerspace and then forming a committee and then discussing what machines to buy, buying them, creating policy around them, and then having like a ribbon cutting ceremony. Our process has been almost exactly the opposite. We got the grants, we received the grants, we realized that we needed to create a space, so we did that. I'll talk about that a little bit more in a minute. And then we bought the technology, and then we began having the programs, and then we're about to create policy around the machines for the public, and we're buying new machines if like the need comes up and everything like that. So it's really a work in progress. It's constantly ongoing. It's like, let's try something, and if it doesn't work, no big deal, we'll try something else. It's a really creative and iterative process, and we're really excited with it. And so I know many of the libraries listening today are probably also smaller or more rural libraries. But even if a bigger library is listening, I still think there will be a lot of ideas for you in this presentation. But our methods aren't necessarily what a bigger library would use. I think it's a little more aimed at a smaller one. So, all right, so what did we do? We got some of these grants. We decided the types of programs that we would offer based on patron feedback. And our first thing we did was move our computers out of the computer lab on that first floor. There were a few benefits to that. Patrons can ask for help with the computers much more easily. The computers are less private. The patrons aren't necessarily happy about that, but that can be good in a library setting. And now we have a room that can be used as a mini makerspace. And then right around the same time, we also began merging various storage closets to open up more rooms that could be accessible to the public. And that actually gave us space for 3 more mini makerspaces around the building: a memory preservation lab, a kids makerspace, and a hangout nook. So we'll discuss all of those coming up.
So that first one, starting with the makerspace, this is that old computer room that we had that we moved all the computers out. This is where we're hosting Project Next Generation. This was a grant funded through the state of Illinois. It was basically that aspect of helping those teenagers that are having that at risk because they can't have those technologies that will help them like further their education. So because this was our first time applying, we ended up getting $25,000. But part of that was that we had to hire 5 mentors to help them explain the software, the different technologies that they're used to, because they only get Chromebooks. But when they tried coming to the library to use our desktop computers or the Windows computers that we had, they could not transfer their knowledge into these different ones. So that's why it was very crucial to get them to have somebody kind of not teaching them in like a high school like classroom setting, but more so it was an open-ended, they're learning at their own pace. It was a very nice way to get kids into the makerspace that we're creating, to get them to learn like this is something that we are going to eventually offer for you. So the rest of that money went into technology. We were basically getting laptops, tablets, drones. We were trying to get into. We were getting into like the Ozobots and Finch robots to help that coding. And then basically everything is kept in this room for the moment because we also have no place else to store it, basically. So here's our computer room. It still says computer room. We don't even have the ability to take that down. It's just windows you can look in, so it's very helpful for anyone looking out can see what we're doing inside, and they're going to start asking questions. So we do have that benefit. Because it was also set up obviously for public computers, the desk heights are obviously for more so adults, because we have those computers downstairs for anyone who is basically in like the babies with the parents, anyone up to like the grade 6. They can go downstairs and use those computers, so the height is not the greatest for anyone who's, of course, in that grades 5th through 12th, because it's not working. See, if you can see, when we were trying to do the robots and we were making them race on the floor, they literally had no place to sit. So when you're like on the left side, we have someone who was definitely older. He was able to sit down, use the laptops, but anyone who was in that 5th grade, they had to stand up. It was not essential for them to use these laptops, go to the machine, get their vinyl to cut. We're learning that this room is not the greatest, and that's why we need to work on it the most. But that's where we're going forward from here. This is why it's only for now using programs for the Project Next Generation.
And I really wanted to show this picture because I was just kind of walking past the makerspace while Brittany was doing a program the other day, and I like saw this image through the window, and I just had, like, did one of those screech to a halt, and I ran and got my phone so I could take a picture just to kind of exemplify how the space is at the moment. It's not a particularly usable space as a makerspace yet. And that's kind of why we wanted to talk about it, because it doesn't really have to be a perfect space to work. we have the technology that we've been able to buy with these grants. We are offering programs, and the teens are getting a lot out of it, and they're really enjoying it. And it doesn't have to be perfect. We didn't have to have that ribbon cutting ceremony and have everything kind of ready to go at once. But we will have it ready to go in the future. We are currently applying for grants to refit the space to make it more usable. If we don't receive them, then we'll do it through our budget, but that'll be a process of a few years. And, if we had waited and said, okay, well, we need the space to be perfect first, then we wouldn't be having any programs. And so I kind of just wanted to get that point across, that it doesn't have to be perfect to be workable. That's important to know. All right, and then up next, we will talk about making our memory preservation labs. So we actually received another grant through an organization called Age Options. And Age Options is a local organization that works with seniors. This was our first time applying, and we received $12,000 to create community spaces and programs for seniors. And this kind of fell out of the sky. Our director received an email one day letting her know that this grant would be available. And actually, only 18 libraries applied for 20 grants from Age Options. So I think that's also something to get across. There is money out there. And then we were just creative in how we decide to use it. By purchasing this technology to do programs for seniors, that is wonderful for our seniors, and then will eventually be wonderful for all of our patrons, because that technology will become available for everybody. So we've developed a robust programming schedule centered around the theme of preserving our memories, and created a digital preservation lab out of the small first floor study room to do it. So we have a VHS to DVD converter, a slide converter, photo scanners, 8mm converters, and more. And it has been wildly popular. I mean, people are really, really excited by this opportunity. So kind of here's what it looks like from the outside. It still says study room. That is, we're updating these things kind of slowly as we go. And here is what the room looks like from the inside. So kind of what we were able to do is just sort of salvage a lot of things we had lying around in the library. I don't know, if this is universal, but at least our library, we had a lot of kind of junk just sort of in our various storage closets, which, it's not ideal, and we need to get rid of a lot of it. And I don't recommend keeping a lot of junk. In this particular case, it turned out to be handy because we had that old TV that we were able to hook up to the DVD to VHS to DVD converter so that people can actually do it. We took a table from our meeting room. We took those shelves as like they were extra shelves lying around from our library. We had these laptops. Both of them were 12 years old, but we were able to make those work. And so the space, it's a small space, but we were really able to make it work for our patrons and make it comfortable enough. And people are using it like crazy. So that's been wonderful.
So making that hangout nook, this is that Harry Potter part of the library that we've been kind of more excited about. It's for grades 2 through 5, and it's basically just where crafting, homework, hanging out, they can come in color. We're going to make these make and take bags where there's supplies inside of these bags that's just a specific craft. So they can just go in there. We have like little desks that they can use to make this craft and then take it home. And this is where we're just kind of calling it more so the hangout nook rather than the makerspace, because it's universal of what they can do inside of there. We wanted it to be like a safe place for those kids that maybe have like younger siblings and they don't really fit in exactly also with like the teen part. This is where that grades 2 through 5 come and just kind of hang out, have a nice time, and have a space for themselves. So here it is. One of the other things that Lizzy's been talking about is we don't even have light when it's dark. We have basically this whole setup, and then we promptly ran out of money for the actual things that we wanted to put inside of this. So we got the furniture, we got the shelves, and then we have no ability to further it at this moment. So it's just kind of like hanging out there. So people are seeing it, they're questioning it, and they're becoming aware of it. So this is actually this built up basically this idea of like this is going to be what it is, and people have been really excited to see what it's going to do, because first we need obviously lights because of safety reasons, but it's been a huge success with kids asking about it and wanting to go in there. So this is where, again, that ribbon cutting will eventually kind of happen, but we've been actually building up that hype for it by doing it this way.
Okay, and then last but not least is making the Kids Makerspace. So right now the Kids Makerspace is an idea. It is not being put into practice in any physical way. But we have applied for grants to help us reconstruct a room. We have sort of an old storage room down near our children's section that we would like to use for this. If we don't receive them, we still intend to make the kids makerspace, but sort of similar to our makerspace upstairs, it'll be a process of many years as we kind of do it through our budget. But eventually we'd like it to have a toy library, it'll be an extra programming room, and it'll offer technology programs for grades K through 4 in STEAM and robotics, and we would also like to add in some sensory objects as well. So currently it looks like this. This is the storage room. There is a wall and a floor. There's no ceiling, which you can't see in this picture. The ceiling is pipes. And it's certainly not a wall or a floor that I would want, a kindergartner anywhere near. So it's, this is a work in progress, but it's an idea that we're really excited about kind of getting started. So at this point, we'd like to talk about, this kind of issue of our library is a fairly large building for our population size, so we have some of these extra spaces. And though our budget is small compared to many libraries in our area, it is about $1 million a year. And so I know that's still bigger than what many other libraries have. So we just kind of want to discuss what can you do, how can you put these ideas into practice if your library doesn't have the space, or if your staff and budget are just too small to make this type of thing work. So first, one idea that we've already put into practice is a craft exchange. And we set it up directly outside of our new makerspace, and it's very low staff impact. Patrons can take a craft supply from it, or they can leave a craft supply in it. And we are not policing it. They don't have to be a North Riverside patron. They don't have to take something to leave something, or leave something to take something. It is run by the patrons. And it's received a massive patron response. We've received a ton of donations, which we also kind of take for our own programs and bring into the makerspace as well. And the Facebook post about it went viral. By our standards, it was shared about 75 times, which for us, that was a huge number. And it really furthers the library and the makerspace mission of expanding creativity and learning for our patrons. So it's been really worthwhile. Here's what it looks like.
And this was one of the situations where we completely rearranged the library to kind of make these extra shelvings work for us. And what we ended up doing was we went to Big Lots basically and bought a ton of the clearance bins. And we kind of are trying to keep everything like that color coding. So the teal lids are the ones that are on the craft exchange. And then later on when we talk about the library things, like those are going to have gray, because we wanted people to be aware that we are having different sections of different things. So people don't have to kind of walk into these shelves and be like, what am I looking for exactly? Mm-hmm. So we're really trying to keep this patron friendly and make it so it looks as organized as we can have it, because really it's just shelves with bins in it. And it's actually been very beneficial for the patrons to be walking in and having this access like this.
And the one piece of staff time that it does require is to kind of keep the bins labeled. So if somebody brings something in that there is no bin for, we'll make a bin for it. But that's really about it. So.
And then the library of things, it's been an extremely slow start for us to start with this one. But right now, we had a donation from a patron who wanted to see turntables and stamp sets to come in. So they brought them in, and we ended up getting to have them be checkoutable. And from there, we realized there's been a lot of interest with people getting to have internet at their house, because a lot of patrons do not have access to internet. So this is where we're also putting our wireless hotspots. And in the future, we definitely want to see Rokus with Netflix, because a lot of parents go on vacation or take their kids to these places that they just want to have the ability to have them watch movies that they can't necessarily maybe get at the library at that moment. And a ton of the teens, of course, want game consoles, and we realize that's a need. And then also the biggest thing that circulation has been hearing from is cooking supplies. And from there, that's where we're realizing, putting out those surveys again, saying this is what we have, what else would you guys like to see? Because now people are actually seeing what they can have in this library of things.
Oh, and here's what it looks like. So right now, this is pretty much all we've got. But we put some money in the budget for it next year. And our friends and foundation are really going to help us out as we start to build it up. So it will expand slowly, but it will expand. And one thing we're also thinking of with this is starting to buy things that are good for experiential learning. So if we start to offer sewing machines through the Library of Things, we'll start also to have sewing classes and things like that. So it's very exciting. And then next, like, I think that it's possible some people out there listening and saying, well, I really can't rearrange the library to make that much shelf space. It's just not possible. Our library doesn't have that kind of room. And we completely understand that. And so we wanted to talk about this idea of maker kits. Our current director came from 2 libraries in Michigan that are very small. The Door Library has a budget of less than $200,000 and 7 part-time staff members only. And the Hopkins District Library has a budget of only $100,000 and only 3 part-time staff members. And that includes the director in both cases. And they were able to basically just dedicate a cart to this idea, just 1 cart. And they put maker kits on it. So these things, these kits are ideas like a scrapbooking kit, a knitting kit, ghost hunting kits, energy efficiency kits, exercise kits, canning kits. If you can think of something that you'd like to do, there's probably something you can lend out related to it. And people still kind of get that experiential, STEAM, creative, like learning experience through that way. So that is something that even a very small library can still do and make happen.
And this is exactly where that listening to what the patrons would like to see as well, because it's always going to be a hit or miss. You can always get something and maybe nobody will care, even though a couple people had asked for it. Maybe it's just something that's not as popular. But one of the things that we ended up doing in our library is that we made strategic planning mini grants, which is where staff have the ability to actually submit an application for something for the library to use. I mean, right now we had all of these like really noisy carts that were like 20 years old, and patrons were complaining that they were too noisy. So a staff member got to make a mini grant and ask for a new cart. And this is where the staff are going to have more of the ability to promote the library's mission and also have that idea that they took on this thing to make sure the patrons were happy. So the mini grants could be up to about like $500. And how this works is that 2 managers and the director meet quarterly to review these mini grants. I mean, people could be approved, they could be turned down. Maybe sometimes the staff can only get like $200 out of their $300 grant, and they just kind of have to like poke around the internet and see if they can find a deal for it. But we want to make sure that the staff members are getting heard and that we are listening to what they know patrons want to see and see it, like, even if it's in program for anything. It's just the best way to get staff on board and kind of take that initiative to say, now here's our chance to say something that the library does need.
Okay, so making the space work.
Mostly we've been going on, we have the Reaching Across Illinois system, and that's where a lot of libraries, if they're giving away, I mean, we just got recently tables from a local library, so we're looking at their classifieds and seeing what we can actually get from people. Like we mentioned earlier, Big Lots has been the biggest place to get all of our bins for storage. We've used old filing drawers, those extra bookshelves that Lizzy pointed out in our memory preservation lab. A lot of places like IKEA, Amazon, and Walmart, because of the tax exemption, we've been going there. And then a lot of the things actually has just been coming from patron donations. And that's been the biggest help for us to start these makerspaces out and see where we can go from there.
And I just want to say regarding patron donations, I think a lot of times, I know I myself have kind of an instinctual horror of too many patron donations, because things come in and they don't really work, or they're rickety, or they're not needed for the space. And sometimes people just want to give us things they don't want in their house anymore, and they're just hoping we can take it off their hands. So I wouldn't say, the patron donations are great 100% of the time. But one thing we've found very successful is requesting certain items. So we'll say, hey, listen, we need buttons for Makerspace craft, and people will bring them in, and that's really useful. And then I also just recommend looking at the patron donations kind of with a more creative and critical eye. It might be something that at first glance you think, no, that's not really what we're looking for, but that actually could be really good in the space. And if you know what you want the space to be, and you have that kind of clear idea, then that is a really great way to kind of make it work if you think creatively about some of the things, like that TV that was given to us that is currently in our memory preservation lab. Okay, I think we've talked a lot about grants throughout this session, and grants are obviously a hot topic because they are what allowed us to do what we're doing as quickly as we're doing it. There are grants out there that can help with library construction and space reconfiguration if that's something that's needed. And I think what we really recommend is just to apply very widely. You won't get them all. We have been turned down for a lot. I was turned down for one about a month ago that really hurt. But there's more out there than most people realize. And if you're creative about the terms of the grant, you know, the money is for this one thing, but how can you use that one thing and do that one thing and fulfill the grant, but also make it valuable to the whole rest of the library, you know, in that context, then you can find, you know, you might apply for things you might never have a thought about applying for before you started thinking in that way. And I think what we particularly recommend is try to see if you can find a staff member who's willing or excited to take it on. And if you can, give them the time and the resources to do it. I think that's the biggest thing. When I am working on a grant, I go hide actually in that memory preservation lab on one of those laptops where when it's not available to the public, just so that I can concentrate without interruptions. Even if it's just an hour off the desk a day or taking one other thing off their plate, if you can find somebody who's excited, that is good as gold. So we recommend it.
So how do we manage to keep it all together? We do not. We're prone to crying a lot and
True.
being really stressed and tired.
No.
But in the chaos, it's been actually a lot of fun. So like in the case of the Makerspace with the Project Next Generation, it's run by me, the technology manager, and those 5 mentors. We're basically in this room helping these teams with any questions that they have, showing them briefly like what they should do, and then just kind of letting them have a total hands-on experience. And it's so fascinating watching them just like take on this thing and make something fantastic out of it. I mean, we have a ton of like display things out now to show that they're proud of what they're doing and that they're learning, and it's a lot of fun. The memory preservation room, it's run by the senior services librarian, it's run by Lizzy, and the technology manager again, and basically the circulation staff in regards to helping the patrons make like the appointments to go in there, and so nobody's like overlapping and fighting for these machines. And they're just basically keeping an eye on everything, making programs out of it, being around only to answer questions as needed, because more so these involve the adults, and so it's, you know, better to kind of like step away and let them have their hands-on ability to do all this stuff. Downstairs for that children's makerspace, this is the one that Lizzy pointed out has, you know, no ceiling or walls or anything. That's run by the youth services manager, the youth services assistant to buy the supplies, and the youth services staff members' assistants more so, because parents are encouraged to be in the room with their children, and they're going to be around with the staff only to answer questions, kind of just help out with any kind of questions involving like the technology, but questions involving like what can they do in this room, what should they be doing in this room, like how they can maybe actually make sure that like parents are walking in there and seeing like I have an idea of how this could be made better. So the staff members are kind of just around to be around, and then the Hangout Nook is in direct view of the help desk. This is going to be completely up to the youth service manager and the youth service assistant to buy supplies, and the staff members are around just to kind of for like that upkeep more so, to kind of like straighten things out and make everything look tidy for like the next batch of kids who might come through. So we're kind of completely taking like that hands-off situation with the staff, just being around for questions more so than running a program, because we want kids and parents to kind of have that space for them to go in there and hang out together and have fun.
Okay, and then this is a step-by-step process. Nothing is happening overnight. We're kind of going slowly, or we're doing it in an iterative way. One resource that I really recommend if you want to kind of go through this yourself is called Making Space for Active Learning in Your Library, and that is through WebJunction. And it is a free resource. It's a self-paced learning experience to help guide your library through the process of rethinking and reconfiguring physical space to make room for active learning in your library. So it's really valuable. And another thing, I didn't write it down, but I'll say here, if you're interested in sort of the usability of the physical space, there's a book by a man named Steve Krug called Don't Make Me Think. And it's about usability. He talks about website usability, but also about physical spaces and using observation to figure out like what is necessary for a physical space. So that is another book that I really recommend if you're going to go through this process and start rethinking your spaces in that way. And then, so some tips and tricks. First, we recommend you apply for grants. Like I said before, you won't get them all. If you're unsure if you can get it, should you still apply? You should. Like, less people do apply than you think. And I actually meant to say on that previous slide, but I saw that through the Indiana State Library, there's actually a really good page on grants. that has a lot of resources for you there. And then also just be kind of creative about how you search for them. There are quite a few of similar webinars to what we're doing now on the topic of grants, so I recommend that as well. And there's a lot of information out there, and there's a lot of kind of like hidden grants. Like I think, you know, Chili's offers like kind of a grant for community organizations, things like that. So start to think kind of creatively about who might be granting money. And then the next is survey your community. You know, makerspaces are a really hot topic right now, and I think people think, oh, great, like I'll just do this because this is what libraries are doing. And that may not necessarily be bad for your patrons. It could be very good, but we really recommend that you talk to them first. Figure out what the patrons and your community actually really want. And once you've done that, then you can kind of go full steam ahead with the understanding that you're doing the right thing and that it's, you know, what the community really needs from you. And you know, that will actually kind of help with our next point of getting staff on board. So this is a big transition for staff. It's going to be some extra work and it needs buy-in. First, you know, the day-to-day work of the library isn't going away. So for the most part, you won't be able to really take responsibilities away from your staff. This will be, in certain cases, asking them to go above and beyond. And so in order to get staff on board, to be able to point at these community surveys and say, you know, this is why we're doing it. This is what we have backing us up. This is why it's necessary. That can really help staff to understand the importance of the new work they'll be doing. And also, you know, it is a lot for us. And so we're doing a lot of work to try and find volunteers who are interested in helping in this space. And we're going to have an intern this summer to help us in the space. And that will take some load off of the staff as well. So we recommend that. And then kind of just this last idea of, you know, we are going really fast and we're kind of going very whole hog. You know, we're doing 4 or 3.5 spaces at once, kind of. And it is kind of a lot. And you know, that's partially because of the grants that we were very, very, very lucky to receive. But the work can be undertaken slowly, and you can do it in a piecemeal fashion, one makerspace machine at a time, or one small space at a time, as you get the resources to do it through your budget, or through your friends group, or through a grant. All of our spaces, for example, are still very much in progress, and you know that's really okay. So you don't have to just go whole hog, change your entire library all at once. That's not necessary. For example, we have not even changed our signage yet. So
yes, we just are prone to taking posters that we have lying around and sticking them over everything that looks like it says something that is not what it is anymore.
We haven't been able to actually get the letters down, so we're hiding them. And with that, we will conclude our presentation. Here is our contact information if you have any questions and would like to get in touch with us in the future, but we are also very happy to take any questions now as well.
Okay, we did have a question. I think they answered it in the chat, but the name of the book was Don't Make Me Think?
Yes, Don't Make Me Think by Steve Krug. It's spelled K-R-U-G.
Oh, great. Also, someone asked about where do you look for grants? Do you have a web page you go to or a certain book? I know you say everywhere, but any certain spot?
Yeah. You know, I wish it was as simple as that. We do look at the ALA website quite a bit, and Web Junction is another good resource for webinars about grants. A lot of what I do is Googling like our neighborhood and grants, and also I've signed up. So in Illinois, we have Rails, which is kind of this big like network of every Illinois library, and there are mailing lists who send out information when new grants are coming up. So we've kind of been able to take advantage of that to a really large degree. That's what we do. But if the person who asked would like to email me, I can send some links to the places that I look, if you'd like.
Okay, thanks so much.
Sure.
Also, how do you do your survey? Did you do it like a paper, or did you do Google form? Did you put it on Facebook, web page?
We printed it out, so it's just a paper right at the circulation, right where everyone's checking in and out their books. We just have them in 2 little display stands, and people can look at them completely anonymous. They just fold them up, hand them right back. We just kind of get them passed along to me or Lizzy, and then we kind of go from there with buying the materials that maybe people are interested in.
Mm-hmm. And we did do it on Facebook as well, actually. And that was just to try and get the people who follow us and are kind of our fans but aren't able to get into the library all that often. So we put it up and said, what would you like to see, and those images, and people were able to answer in the chat box. But we didn't actually do a Google form because the way that people kind of find information about our library didn't really make that particularly conducive to our situation. But that isn't to say, I mean, Google form would be a great option.
Okay. We had another question, or Harmony says they mentioned that some of the rooms aren't always open. I am wondering how they choose when to keep them open.
Great question. So right now, a lot of it, because just kind of due to the staffing level, a lot of it in the memory preservation lab is by appointment. Our intention eventually is to kind of get people certified on the machines. So we'll teach them how to use it. And then whenever they come in, as long as nobody else is currently using it, they're welcome to. It'll be first come, first serve. With the Makerspace, right now it's largely open during teen programs that are scheduled.
Yeah, it's twice a week programs at this moment, on Tuesday nights and then Saturday afternoons. That just happened to be when the team said that they were most available, and then that's only when I can step away, the technology manager can step away, and then those mentors have been just conveniently saying that those are the days that work best for them, because one's a weekend. We're not open on Sundays. So having that one weekend availability and then that one during the week availability just has been the best way for us to kind of monitor when the teens are coming in and when we can do those programs. Otherwise, it's closed off for the moment. For that reason, is that because this is like specifically what the grant kind of said, that they want it to be just for those grades 5 through 12. We just can't unfortunately open it up just yet with the rest of the public.
When we do, so our intention is once the terms of the grant end, we will make it available to the public. And at that time, we're going to do two different things. First is we will certify people on the machines. So like if you want to use our sewing machine, we'll sit with you one-on-one for like an hour, make sure you know how to use it. And then from then on, you can use it whenever you'd like. But the caveat to that is that we're going to have open lab hours because we do want a staff member to most of the time be in the room. So we'll say like the open lab hours are each day from this hour to this hour, and that's when you can come in. And then otherwise it'll be by appointment. And that's just to make sure that there's somebody in there in case something goes wrong.
Okay. How about sustainability with anything? How do you do that? Do you put in your budget? Do you have grants? Do you have people give you things? Anything?
Is that sustainability regarding like the materials?
Yeah.
So we are going to actually have, so again, like because of the grant, all the materials are currently purchased through the grant for the teens. In the future, we will probably charge for the materials, but only the cost of the materials. So we won't ever charge extra, and we, won't ever charge to use the machine, but we will probably you'll take it from our craft exchange, which is available, or you'll just kind of like if you're using a piece of wood with like a glow forge, you would pay the cost of the piece of wood. We're hoping to put it in our budget that we can buy some materials each year, that if somebody really has a hardship and can't, they would still be able to access it. But that's kind of how we're intending to make it sustainable.
Great. All right. Thanks. Again, anybody else, if you have questions, I know there's all kinds of ways you can adapt this to your library, your situation, lots of other ways to do things. So anybody else do this currently or something similar, or you want to put some more suggestions out in the chat? This has been really great information. You guys have done a wonderful job with your library, and thanks for sharing what you're doing. That's awesome.
Well, thank you all very much, and thank you for attending this webinar. We hope you enjoyed it, and please do, if you have any questions, email us. Thanks again.
Okay, we're having lots of thanks. At this point, I'm going to go ahead and bring up the LEU form, but please go ahead and put questions on. We'll stay on we've got 10 more minutes. So the way you get your LEU is just click on the Making a Mini Makerspace and then upload the file. You can save it on your computer. You can print it out. And I know some people aren't able to do this, so that's why I send out the follow-up email, because then I can make your form and send it to you. Okay, let me go through here and see if I've got any other questions. We have, someone said we have patrons make appointments to use the Makerspace, so there will be staff available for them. Another person's asked farther down, I'm in a poverty-stricken area. Are there any partnerships with other state governmental agencies? Have you had that at all?
Well, is that question for Brittany and I, do you think?
Yeah, because I don't know. Of course, neither of us will know what other states do. But did you go through any
Yeah.
state governmental agencies?
So we did actually. The Project Next Generation grant for the teenagers we received came from the Illinois Secretary of State, and that was partially because in our neighborhood, and I actually meant to say this, but at Kamarek School, our local middle school, there is a very high percentage of students living in poverty. And so because the school, as I said, is kind of really struggling with space themselves, that kind of leaves an opportunity for the library to step in. And I think that's a big part of the reason we were able to receive that grant from the Secretary of State. Of course, I couldn't speak to whether or not Indiana or any other states would have something similar, but I wouldn't be too surprised if there was. I think that's something that you could definitely reach out to your state government about.
Okay, thanks.
Mhm.
It looks like I made a mistake on our certificate, so I am very sorry about that. I will send that out to everybody corrected, so don't worry about downloading that file. Okay, any other comments or questions? Anybody else going to start a new makerspace, or you're looking to do that? Yep, we've got one, Marion. Marion is in the process.
Woo!
And actually, that's where I am at right now. Go, Marion.
Oh, and Paula sorry. Paula, just a heads up, Brittany and I can't, our screen kind of froze again, so we can't see the chat, what people are saying, I'm sorry to say. But everybody, hello, thank you very much.
Okay. Yeah, sorry about that. Our technology is a little goofy today, but that,
Yeah, ours is too, that's how it happens.
yeah. So what I will do is I'll make sure I do save the chat, and if we don't get to your questions, I'll send it to Britney and Lizzy, and just to make sure we didn't miss anything.
Oh, yes, thank you.
So we're getting a lot of we are hoping to start one soon. They love the idea of the craft supply exchange.
It's been such a great thing.
Mm-hmm. Some people are saying they might expand on the ideas. Lots of thank yous. Got places that have gotten donations.
If somebody does expand on it, we would love you to send us pictures and show us what you did. That would be incredible.
Okay. Okay, well, I think at this point we might just go ahead and I think the chat has kind of calmed down a little bit. We'll go ahead and I'll stay on for a few more minutes. I just want to say thank you very, very much to both Britney and Lizzy for taking the time to do this today and inspiring us.
Thank you, Paula, for having us. We really appreciate it.
Okay. All right. Well, for now, we'll go ahead and maybe we'll hit our mics or mute our mics, and we will stop the recording.